Man or bear? The question that is sweeping the internet as I'm writing this and will probably be all but forgotten by the time I post this, but hey, let me take a shot anyway. In the unlikely event that you don't know what I mean by man or bear discourse, it's basically this. A TikToker, Screenshot HQ, posted a video featuring women who were asked this question. Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear? Of the 8 women shown in the video, 7 chose the bear. The video went viral and sparked a larger conversation in which women shared their experiences and attempted to provide men with some insight into why so many of them would choose the bear, and men got indignant and defensive and self-righteous and provided women with a reminder of why they chose the bear. If this conversation feels familiar to you, be you man, woman, or NB, that's probably because we have some variation of it every few years. The last big one that we had was, I think, during the height of the Me Too movement in 2017, though there have been smaller, more localized versions of Me Too since then. Compared to Me Too, man or bear feels lighter, because it's centered around a hypothetical question, whereas Me Too was about exposing and imposing consequences for real offenses committed by and against real people. But man or bear isn't just for fun. That hypothetical question refers to the actual lived experiences of women. If you are a woman, chances are you've had at least one experience where a man has made you feel uncomfortable, or threatened, or done something even worse. If you are a man, chances are you know a woman who has had such experiences, whether they've told you about it or not. Chances are also good, if you are a man, that, intentionally or not, you have made a woman feel uncomfortable or threatened. It's not a pleasant realization, but insight isn't always fun. Anyway, the man or bear discourse did remind me of Me Too, but it also felt familiar for another reason. I'm an atheist, and if you go back and watch some of my older videos, you'll see that I used to talk about atheism-related topics quite a lot. I was a very minor participant in the atheist movement that sprang up in the mid-2000s as a result of the publication of popular books like The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens, and The End of Faith by Sam Harris. Driven by interest in this so-called new atheism, a community of atheists and skeptics coalesced on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. We talked about science, we argued with religious folks, and we reveled in how much smarter and more logical we thought we were. It was great. What a pack of, ironically enough, holier-than-thou assholes we were. Then, in June of 2017, Rebecca Watson, who created the website Skepchick and was, and still is, an awesome atheist skeptic YouTuber, posted a video in which she describes something that happened to her at a conference she had recently attended. She was hanging out with some others from the conference in the hotel bar. It was very late, and she announced to the group, "Hey, I'm calling it a night. I'm going to bed," and left. She got on the elevator, and this guy got on the elevator with her, and the guy said, "I'd love to talk to you more. Would you come to my room for coffee?" And at this point in her video, Rebecca says, "Word to the wise, guys, don't do that." She goes on to explain that it makes her and many, many other women uncomfortable to be alone in an enclosed area with a man they don't know who is implicitly propositioning them. Plus, she had been invited to that conference in the first place to talk about sexism in the atheist community, which she had done earlier that day, and she made it clear to the group at the bar that she was done for the night, she was going to her room and going to bed. So, yeah. Guys, don't do that. Seems like reasonable advice to me. She doesn't accuse this guy of anything other than making her uncomfortable. She doesn't say he's a rapist or a potential rapist. She doesn't rant and rave and accuse. She just describes the situation, expresses how she felt about it and why, and guys don't do that. Being calm, rational people, the atheist community received this message thoughtfully in its intended spirit and took Rebecca's words into consideration during future interactions with, I'm kidding, obviously, that's not what happened at all. This non-event at a hotel during an atheist conference was dubbed elevatorgate. and it fractured the atheist community into two camps. At first, anyway. There was further splintering to come, but that's neither here nor there. The two camps were composed of people who felt what Rebecca Watson said was reasonable and inoffensive, and people who felt that she had just accused every man in the atheist movement of being a violent sex criminal who couldn't be trusted alone with a woman. Oh, wait, that's not exactly true. I'm oversimplifying. The second group also included people who felt that Rebecca Watson was complaining about nothing and deserved to be ridiculed for even sharing this story about a guy doing something that made her uncomfortable when there was so much genuine suffering going on in the world. And one of those people was Richard Dawkins, who wrote a brief response to Rebecca's video in the form of a message to a hypothetical Muslim woman. "Dear Muslimah," writes Dawkins, "stop whining, will you? Yes, I know you had your genitals mutilated with a razor blade, and yawn. Don't tell me yet again I know you aren't allowed to drive a car, and you can't leave the house without a male relative, and your husband is allowed to beat you, and you'll be stoned to death if you commit adultery. But stop whining, will you? Think of the suffering your poor American sisters have to put up with. Only this week I heard of one. She calls herself Skep Chick, and do you know what happened to her? A man in a hotel elevator invited her back to his room for coffee. I am not exaggerating. He really did. He invited her back to his room for coffee. Of course, she said no, and of course he didn't lay a finger on her, but even so. And you, Muslimah, think you have misogyny to complain about. For goodness sake, grow up, or at least grow a thicker skin." I suppose if Dawkins composed a man or bear version of this, it would go something like, "Dear bear attack sobrevivientes, yes, I know you are horribly clawed, mangled, and partially devoured by a humongous wild animal, but think of the suffering of your poor sisters who have had to endure the unwanted, non-violent advances of men who merely wanted the pleasure of their company. You think you have something to complain about. For goodness sake, grow up, or at least grow a thicker skin, which would assuredly have been a welcome advantage during your recent mauling." But I digress. This withering rebuke from the Pope of atheism gave every shitty man, and to be fair, quite a few shitty women, in the movement permission to not only pile on Rebecca and flood her with harassment and abuse, but to do the same to everyone on her side, and to designate as enemies feminists and anyone who believed in principles of social justice and felt those principles should be applied to the atheist community. In the long run, elevatorgate was a hugely positive thing for the atheist community. She didn't mean to, but what Rebecca Watson did for atheists by sharing her story and saying, guys, don't do that, is analogous to what the presidential candidacy of Donald Trump did for the whole United States 5 years later. It revealed everyone for who they really were. In atheist circles, as long as the topics were about science, creationism versus evolution, separation of church and state, that sort of thing, everyone mostly got along. But as soon as the topic became how atheists behave, or what blind spots or prejudices atheists harbor that we should examine, in other words, once the skepticism was directed inward rather than outward, a lot of ugliness that had always been there was revealed and became impossible to ignore. The negative reactions to what Rebecca Watson said in 2011 are the same as the negative reactions to women today, saying they'd rather run into a bear than a man. It's the same defensiveness, the same self-centeredness, the same fragile male ego masquerading as pride and strength, and the same refusal to hear and acknowledge and validate another person's experience in the world. If you're a man, and most especially a cis-hetero man like myself, since we're the ones who seem the most pissed off about this, as usual, if you're a man and you're upset by the man or bear thing, or by the suggestion that, maybe you shouldn't be trying to get women who don't know you to come to your hotel room for coffee at 4 a.m., instead of blaming women, or belittling their concerns, or vilifying feminism, or acting out your persecution complex, try this. Stop. Try to imagine yourself in another person's shoes. Try to imagine how you would feel as a typical woman alone in the woods, or in an elevator with a man you'd never met before, whose intentions you didn't know. Ask yourself why so many women are saying they'd rather take their chances with a bear than a man. Most importantly, ask yourself if you've ever done or said anything that would cause a woman to prefer an encounter with a bear to an encounter with you. Are you aware of how you come off to other people? Do you try not to do or say things that could come off as creepy or threatening? Do you make an effort to recognize and respect the boundaries of other people? When someone tells you that you've crossed a boundary or made them feel uncomfortable, do you receive that thoughtfully and consider that maybe you should adjust your behavior in the future? Or do you shift directly into reactionary defensive mode? Asking these questions, performing these mental exercises is important, especially if you usually don't. The reflexive answer to the concerns represented by women's responses to Man or Bear, or Rebecca Watson's elevator story, or the Me Too movement is not all men. The problem with that response is, while not all men behave in ways that discomfort, threaten, or harm women, not all men who do behave like that are doing it on purpose or with awareness. A lot of the outrage from men about Man or Bear is performative, just as it was in response to elevatorgate, just as it was in response to Me Too. A lot of it is part of the anti-feminist, anti-social justice, anti-woke grift that has been mutating and metastasizing throughout the internet for decades now. A lot of it is coming from men who know at some level that they are behaving in harmful ways and who resent being asked to stop, because they think changing their behavior will be too difficult, or because they just don't want to change, because they feel entitled to act however they want and to treat women in any way they see fit to. If you're a man, but not one of those men, and you're upset by the fact that seemingly most women would rather find themselves face to face with a bear in the woods than with a man, perhaps you want to change that general perception that women have of men. A logical first step toward that is making sure that you are not the sort of man a woman needs to worry about. Which does not mean that you should try to become more like a bear. That is the wrong lesson. You have missed the point. Just for your own good as well as everyone else's, avoid forests and elevators.